Welcome back to Spirit Squared. I'm Andrew Darrington, your host. Tonight, we're here at the Beckham Hotel here in Mineola, Texas. Thank you so much, Chris and Sarah, for letting us borrow this beautiful ballroom. It's a great place to host a podcast. We really enjoy it here. Josh and I are very thankful for the relationship we have with the Beckham Hotel. And we'd like to thank our three sponsors. We've got Red Construction. Thank you so much, Thomas and Martha. And then we've got the Vault and Humidor. Thank you so much, Blake Young and Virginia Young. And then we have Hoot and Holler Package Store in Gun Barrel City. Thank you so much, Scott, for supporting us. Due to you guys' efforts, we've been able to upgrade a lot of equipment, and we've been able to book some guests that typically we wouldn't have. So thank you so much for your support. I really appreciate it. Thank you for seeing the vision of us bringing entrepreneurs and folks that are making a difference in our neighborhoods and in our area. So really appreciate you guys supporting us. Tonight we have a very important guest. I think I'm the most nervous that I've been because I know how much this means to you and how much it meant to me. We met a few months ago. We talked a little bit about the podcast and bringing you on and all that good stuff. You've been a part of Dateline. You've been a part of Top Cops, People's Magazine, and also the Oxygen channel. You've done, public speaking. You've done some teaching. Tonight we have retired Detective Sergeant Alan Patten from the Garland Police Department. Grand Prairie. Sorry, Grand Prairie. He was a homicide detective for how many years?
Over 18.
For over 18 years. We're here tonight. We're going to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce you to our viewing public because we've agreed. I mean, if this works out, we'll cover quite a few of the cases that you were able to solve during your tenure. That's super exciting to me and a lot of people that are listening. I know that recovering these successes and some of the details are going to be valuable to you and also to our listening public for things that they can look for and all that good stuff. So the first thing first, I mean, let's start with your background and kind of your resume that you like to call it.
I grew up in Grand Prairie, Texas. Moved to Grand Prairie before I was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Grand Prairie School. So 5th grade, I graduated without Grand Prairie High School. Went to the Marine Corps, got out of high school. Got out of the Marine Corps, worked for the Dallas Coca-Cola Bottling Company for a couple of years. And then in the spring of 1980, I learned that the Grand Prairie Police Department was hiring. My father was a Dallas police officer. My brother was a Cedar Hill police officer. And I made application and I was hired August 1st, 1980 as a Grand Prairie police officer. I spent just over 4 years as a street cop. And in November of 1984, the Grand Prairie Police created an opening for 2 detectives to work juvenile crimes. Crimes committed by juveniles and against juveniles as victims. Mm-hmm. And it was myself and a female detective, and we worked those kind of crimes for not quite a year. And then apparently I was making an impression on the investigative command staff, and in the summer of 1995, I was asked to become a property crimes detective, working residential property crimes in Northeast Grand Prairie. And I did that job for just over 2 years. And then I was asked to take on the role as a business property crimes detective, working property crimes that occurred in businesses on the north side of Grand Prairie. Mm-hmm. And so I did that job for a couple of years. Well, then in the summer of 1990, I was given an opportunity to transfer into what was then called the Crimes Against Persons Unit. The Crimes Against Persons being self-explanatory.
Right.
Murder, sexual assault, kidnapping, stabbing, shootings, any crime against a person. And I worked in the Crimes Against Persons Unit, which later became changed to the name Major Crimes, for 18 years, 1 month, and 15 days.
Wow.
Nearly 8 years of of that time, I was a detective in the unit. And in the time I spent as a detective in what was a major crimes unit, I was assigned to 25 homicides as a lead detective. In February of 1998, I was about to be promoted to sergeant when a lady that was involved in the cadet murder was found guilty. I was the primary witness, and the police chief called me in and promoted me to sergeant, and then transferred me to become the sergeant over the major crimes unit. And I supervised the major crimes unit for 10 and a half years and created the crime scene unit at the Prairie Police Department and supervised 79 homicides in that 10 and a half years.
Wow.
And I was able to hire basically the best detectives in the police department. And 2 of the detectives that worked for me are now police chiefs at other police departments in Texas.
Right.
So it was a very intense unit, and I would respond to every death investigation that was not attended. So I went to a lot of natural cause deaths that turned out, and there were some others that over the course of the years, after the body was discovered and the autopsy was performed, there would be later information about some information that came from someone that believed their person had been murdered as opposed to died of natural causes. Right. So there were several cases that I investigated as the sergeant of the unit, where once I began the investigation, I continued the investigation because I had the knowledge and the ability to do that at the drive. So fortunately for me, I supervised some incredibly talented detectives.
Yes, sir.
In the 7 years and 8 months or so as a detective, I was incredibly motivated and driven to do everything in my power to bring to justice on behalf of the surviving members of the family of a deceased person or murder victim. Right. To bring to justice for them the person who took the life of their loved one.
Right. When we were talking prior to the podcast, you mentioned this document here that you guys integrate with your initiation for being a detective. So when you're brought into that brethren of folks that are going to do that job, this kind of gets kind of installed in each person, correct?
Yes, sir. In February of 1991, not quite a year into my time as the major crimes unit, I was given the opportunity to attend practical homicide investigation training in Dallas. Mm-hmm. And Vernon Gebreath is a retired New York Police Department Bronx Homicide Task Force commander who has written several books that are practical homicide investigation, and he taught nationwide homicide investigation. And via his training, I came across what is the oath of a practical homicide investigator. Right. And this changed me in a dramatic way. It says here, homicide investigation is a profound duty. As an officer entrusted with such a duty, it is incumbent upon you to develop an understanding of the dynamics and principles of professional homicide investigation. Practical homicide investigation suggests that things be done right the first time, and knowledge is power. Knowledge which has been enhanced with experience, flexibility, and common sense. Practitioners must be prepared to use tactics, procedures, and forensic techniques in their pursuit of the truth, and then follow the course of events and the facts as they are developed to their ultimate conclusion. Death investigation constitutes a heavy responsibility, and as such, let no person deter you from the truth and your own personal commitment to see that justice is done, not only for the deceased, but for the surviving family as well. And remember, we work for God. And that was the motto that I learned from Vernon Gebreath. And the intensity of my investigations dramatically increased when I took this oath of practical homicide.
That's an oath that you passed on to your detectives?
Yes, sir, I did.
Or sergeant?
Yes, sir, I did.
Yeah. Very cool. I can hear the intensity right now, and you're retired.
Yes, sir.
I mean, it's 100% believe, but you believe that.
Yes, sir.
One of the documents that you sent over to me mentioned 1,000 puzzle pieces. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, I have long compared conducting a criminal investigation to piecing together a 1,000-piece puzzle.
Okay.
You know, very seldom in the homicide world were we able to find all 1,000 pieces of the puzzle. We might begin our investigation with, say, 528 pieces of the puzzle, evidence in place.
Right.
And it was our task to discover as much of the remaining 472 pieces of the puzzle as we could. But we put together the pieces of the puzzle that we were able to obtain, and we would put that puzzle together, the criminal case, and submit it to the district attorney to seek indictment and prosecution.
Right.
And so that puzzle sometimes didn't have a whole lot of pieces, but you put together what you could. But what would happen is you didn't let something deter you from doing everything in your power to recover as much evidence as you could during the course of your investigation.
Right.
The Humidor is your online cigar retailing headquarters. Our experienced staff has spent years finding some of the best cigars from around the world to sell to our customers. If you're looking for an online cigar store that can help you find your next favorite smoke, welcome to the Humidor. We began the Humidor because of our deep appreciation of the finer things in life, a good conversation with friends, an aged whiskey, and, of course, a fine smoke. That's why, in addition to selling premium cigars online, we also operate a brick-and-mortar cigar lounge in Tyler, Texas. Our lounge is crafted to provide a classic ambience with modern sensibilities, and we've spent time ensuring that smokers and non-smokers have an enjoyable experience, whether they're there for a drink with friends or to enjoy the game.
Tonight, we're going to be talking about a pretty tough murder that you investigated, Miss Angela Denise Crocket.
Yes.
It's not the first one that you presided over. Is there a particular reason why we're talking about this one first?
Well, I was the primary detective. I was a detective when this murder occurred.
Mm. And
I was at work. Her body was discovered in the morning. Police were called, dispatched.
But out of the ones that this is one that you presented quite a few times, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Gotcha.
sir. It's the most brutal homicide
Gotcha.
I ever investigated. The crime scene was very
rough.
Yes.
Yeah, you sent me quite a few pictures. Obviously, a lot of them are pretty sensitive. So the first kind of note that I got was that Angela's sister had tried to reach out to her. I believe it's in September, was it in September 1992?
It's August 27th.
August 27th, sorry.
When her body was discovered.
But so it was August 26th.
Well, can I talk about her, Angela?
Yeah, please.
Okay.
Sorry, we jumped ahead.
That's okay. Angela was 26 years old.
Okay.
She worked part-time for her father's overhead door company in Arlington. She was a former Army medic.
Okay.
And was attending her last semester of nursing school at Dallas Baptist University. The Navy had already promised her a commission as a lieutenant junior grade to serve as a Navy nurse after her graduation. She was living in an apartment in Grand Prairie, directly across the street from Grand Prairie High School, working for her father in the mornings, going to school in the afternoons, and then living by herself in an apartment on the second floor of a building in this apartment complex.
I got you. I appreciate that. Kind of jumped ahead. Sorry about that. So in late August, her sister tries to reach out to her.
Yes. Her sister and the family had gone to a Rangers game on Thursday, the 27th of August, 1992. that evening, her sister tried to call Angela and got her answering machine. And she left a message for her and never got a return call from her.
Right.
And the next day, Friday, August the 28th, that daughter called her father. Her father's name was Charles, and said she was concerned because Angela had not shown up for work at 8 o'clock that morning. She was very dependable, and she didn't show up for work.
Yeah, and this is before smartphones where you can track people, and we're dealing with landlines.
Yes. So it was 11:15 p.m. at night on the Thursday night, the 27th, when her sister called and left that voice, that answering machine message. At about 11:30 on Friday, August the 28th, Mr. Crocket drove to his daughter's apartment complex.
Mill Creek, I believe.
Mill Valley.
Mill Valley.
Mill Valley Apartments. And he saw that her car was parked in the parking lot. He went upstairs to the apartment, knocks on the door, but got no response. The front door was locked from the inside. Mr. Crocket then went down to the apartment manager's office and asked if they could go use a key to check on the welfare of his daughter.
Right.
The manager walked over to the apartment, which was upstairs, with Mr. Crocket behind her, and she used a master key to open the door. When she opened the door, she looked inside the apartment, and she saw Angela's body on the floor, covered in blood, and she immediately closed the door and locked it, and did not allow Mr. Crocket to see what was inside.
Right.
And then she went down and called the police, and a street cop responded. When he saw what he saw, he asked for detectives from the Crimes Against Persons Unit to respond, as well as crime scene. And we also notified the Dallas County Medical Examiner that we were going to have them respond as well. And they were called to the scene. The officer that responded, his last name was Danford. Me and another detective responded to the crime scene in advance of the medical examiner's folks getting there. And it was our job to review the crime scene, do whatever we need to do.
Other than being told that you had a deceased individual, did they give you any details about like what the crime scene looked like prior to you arriving, or?
No, just that there was a person there that had been killed.
Okay.
And Officer Danford spoke to the manager while myself and another detective were in the apartment reviewing the scene and making some decisions about what to do next. And that officer asked the manager, had Angela ever complained on anybody that lived there? Mm-hmm. And Angela had complained about two older men that had been catcalling her and whistling at her and flirting with her, older guys. And she complained about a man who used to live there named Kenneth Smith, who had moved in June of 1992 to a different apartment complex down the road. So Officer Danford took that information and gave it to me.
What was she complaining about, Mr. Smith?
She complained to the manager that Mr. Smith had been leaving notes on her car wanting to date her.
Oh, okay.
And so that made him what I will call a person of interest. And in this case, there were a number of persons of interest.
Right.
In the apartment, I'll get into the autopsy in a bit, but
right.
In the apartment, it appeared that she was laying on her back and she had on a nightgown that had been pulled up over her breast, and there were multiple stab wounds. She had suffered an incised wound across her nose, and her throat had been cut. And it appeared that she had been sexually assaulted. Didn't know post-mortem
Right.
or prior to being killed. There was blood everywhere. On her refrigerator, there was a dry erase board that had the names of 8 or 10 men with their phone numbers on there. So we gathered all of those names, and then eventually I spoke to the family and got some more information about her ex-boyfriend. And so we were establishing a persons of interest list, and me and as the detective divided up the different persons. Crime scene responded, and at the crime scene investigator cut out a large section of the carpet underneath the body. And in the bathroom, there was a beer bottle sitting on the sink. And it appeared clear that whoever had killed her had drank this beer and cleaned up in the sink. There was blood everywhere. And the crime scene then was trying to find where that beer bottle came from. Went to the refrigerator and opened the refrigerator. This beer bottle had been wiped clean of fingerprints by whoever left it there. And inside the refrigerator, there was a 12-pack of bottled beer, and there was also a Franzia brown wine box in the refrigerator. On the front of that wine box was a smear of blood. The crime scene investigator lifted a single fingerprint off the top of that wine box. Now that single fingerprint could have belonged to her,
Right.
to someone who put it on a shelf at a store. There's no telling who that print belonged to, but it was on the top of this Franzia brand wine box that had a smear of blood on it. So it was collected as part of the physical evidence.
Kind of like, I think we have it.
Yeah, exactly.
We'll take a look at it maybe later.
Yes, and there was also a Church's chicken box
Okay.
in the bottom of the refrigerator that had some prints on it as well. So that was collected also.
Yeah.
I did a canvas of the apartment complex, that building specifically, to see what we could learn about what neighbors may have heard or seen. At the crime scene, based on what I saw initially, because I say this all the time, a crime scene will talk to you if you just listen to the crime scene. Based upon what I saw in the crime scene, I felt confident I was going to solve this crime because this crime was driven by passion.
Yeah,
This was
somebody close.
overkill. This was overkill in a way that I've never seen before.
Right.
And so I felt comfortable that eventually we're going to find out who this person is, all this anger is in, and we're going to be able to figure out who did this. But you still have to go through the investigation and do the gathering and do the interviewing.
Sure.
I went across the hall to the neighbor that lived across the hall. And that neighbor said, I was watching TV at 11:15 last night, which is the same time that her sister called her answering machine.
Yeah.
And I heard a scream. I turned my TV down and the scream stopped. The first wound she suffered was her throat was cut. Didn't sever her carotid artery, but it severed her voice box.
Yeah, both sides.
So she was unable to scream. I went and talked to the man who lived downstairs. He said he was sleeping. At about 11:15, he heard tromping on the ceiling. And then the tromping stopped. That's probably when she was deceased, because there were multiple stab wounds. And so he went back to sleep. So there were two people that lived there that gave us an idea of what time this crime occurred. Neither one of them called the police, but he made the determination at 11:15 p.m. on Thursday night, the 27th of September, is when she was attacked and she was killed. Her door was locked with her key. So there was clearly, whoever had killed her had taken her keys.
Right.
Her car was still there.
Right.
But the key used to lock the door was not found. It wasn't there. And there was a set of knives in the kitchen, but there wasn't a knife there that we could say was the murder weapon. While I was there, crime scene is there, the medical examiner has shown up. I'm standing at the bottom of the stairs, and a lady comes around the corner and she says, "Is that Angela's apartment? Is she okay?" I said, "Well, ma'am, I can't really talk to you about that." She goes, "Is she dead?" I said, "Well, yes, ma'am, she is." She said, "Last night, about 8:30, I came around the corner and I saw a Hispanic male walking up the stairs to her apartment carrying a bag of some kind of fast food. And he knocked on the door and she opened the door and she let him in her apartment. I had never seen her let someone in her apartment before. So I said, "Describe this person for me." So she described him as a Hispanic male, 18 to 21 years old, 5'10" to 6 foot tall, 150 to 160 pounds, wearing Western clothing. And that was a pretty specific description.
Right.
And she said, "Well, I've been a victim of a crime before. I'm very observant."
And this doesn't fit this doesn't match any of the descriptions of any of the three folks that she had complained about, correct?
No.
So this is an additional person of interest.
Yes, sir. More additional
And
person.
doesn't match any of the names that are on her.
No.
Okay.
And
Or
so,
ice chip, or ice box.
right, so then the medical examiner comes and they transport her body to Dallas for an autopsy. And in the interim, I talked to her father. And he tells me about a boyfriend that they had a bad breakup. And he was attending a college in North Texas, up in the Sherman area. And so he became a person of interest as well. Well, as we're gathering the persons of interest list, including the names of all the men whose names were written on the dry erase board,
Right.
the medical examiner conducts the autopsy. And they let us know that she was stabbed 113 times.
Wow.
Her throat was cut and her eyes were cut. An incised wound from a guy who's done my fair share of investigations of crime scenes is a personal attack.
Absolutely.
I know you know me, I don't want you to see what I'm doing.
Right.
And I felt for sure the neck wound was the first wound. And while her throat had been cut, again, the carotid artery was not cut, neither was the jugular vein, just her vocal cords.
At 113 times, and some of those include defensive wounds.
Yes.
Where does that compare to other murders that you've investigated and solved?
This was the most brutal crime scene I'd ever seen.
I mean, a large disparity.
Yes.
Is it typically 5 to 10 or
Yes.
less?
Yes.
And now we're dealing with 113.
113. So
Wow.
to me, as the detective, there was a lot of anger in this person. Again, the overkill aspect of it.
Right.
Which I felt for sure, if I could figure out who that person was, there would be an answer to the overkill answer to that.
Right.
So families providing us with these names, and
Yes.
et cetera. And so this other detective and I are to begin in that part while we're waiting for the autopsies coming. And the medical examiner determines that Angela was sexually assaulted post-mortem.
Mm.
So after she was deceased, she was sexually assaulted.
Mm.
The medical examiner discovered 2 pubic hairs mixed in to Angela's pubic region that were not hers. The medical examiner also found 1 chest hair matted in the blood in her chest, on her chest. The crime scene was photographed, fingerprinted,
Right.
all that stuff we talked about already. The beer bottle was white cream. Again, the carpet was shut, it was cut out.
Right.
I conducted the neighborhood canvass, told you about that already. And the one name that stuck out to us that she complained on was Kenneth Renord Smith, who was 32 years old.
Right. And the Hispanic male.
And the Hispanic male who all we had up was a description of, because the family didn't recognize the description of the Hispanic male at all. They had no idea who that was.
Sure.
And he was Hispanic. I was serving as the public information officer for the Grand Prairie PD at this time.
Okay.
I created a press release, which I gave the details, basic details of this one being killed, and the description of this Hispanic male that was given to me by the lady who had seen this guy carrying the box of what was Kentucky, the church's chicken, up to the apartment. Because he clearly had to be a person of interest since around 8:30 that night.
Oh,
he was
yeah,
up there.
absolutely.
Okay? So that press release was released by the Dallas-Fort Worth newspapers and was also written about in newspaper stories as well.
Yes, sir.
On September the 3rd, the crime lab reports they found 9 other pubic hairs on the carpet that was underneath her body. The lab advises that all 11 of the hairs that have been recovered were from an African American.
Okay.
The lab also reported they had enough seminal fluid for a DNA comparison to any possible suspects.
Right.
On September the 3rd, the other detective and I are beginning our review of the persons of interest. This other detective made contact with Kenneth Smith, who then was working for Dallas Area Rapid Transit.
Darn.
Yes.
Yeah.
And asked him about the notes that Angela had told the manager he was leaving on her car. He denies having ever left notes on her car.
This is over the phone?
No, this is in person.
Okay, so you call him in.
Yeah.
call-
The detective called
Sorry,
Kenneth Smith in.
okay.
On that day, I'm out in North Texas
Gotcha.
to go talk to the boyfriend and take DNA from him and swabs.
Gotcha.
Here, take it to the medical examiner's office.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
Vault Arms is your premier destination for all things firearms. Extensive selection of handguns, rifles, shotguns, and accessories. Knowledgeable staff to assist you in finding the perfect firearm to fit your needs. State-of-the-art gun range equipped with the latest technology for a safe and thrilling shooting experience. Take advantage of our professional shooting instruction and training programs suitable for all skill levels. Host your next group outing, corporate event, or bachelor party at our spacious and secure shooting facility. Committed to promoting responsible gun ownership and firearm safety. Fully licensed and compliant with all state and federal regulations.
Well, he denied leaving any notes on her car,
Okay.
but we were taking fingerprints from every person of interest
Right.
to match with the fingerprint that was found on the wine box. And when this detective interviewed him, he told the detective that he worked on August 27th from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m.
Okay.
And we're pretty certain the murder occurred at 11:15 p.m.
Right. Hard
Hard to be from Dallas to Grand Prairie in 15 minutes.
absolutely.
My sergeant, on September the 4th, the next day, my sergeant gets a phone call from a stylist at Heflin's Airport, Arlington.
Okay.
She said that a man matching the description of the Hispanic male that I put out in the press release was in her airport to get a haircut, and he was talking about Angela and how he knew her.
Okay.
And she did not know what this guy's name was, but he was talking about knowing Angela Crocket.
Okay.
And he matched the description that I put out on the press release the day before. Initially, this information that she gave us was pretty much dismissed because the medical examiners told us we're looking for an African American male.
Right, but that's only knowing that she was sexually assaulted after post-mortem,
Yes.
which meant that both individuals could have been involved in two separate crimes.
Yes.
Okay.
So we had this person who we do not know who his person is,
Right.
and we have among the persons of interest Kenneth Smith.
And so she says, hey, I think I know who this guy is. He's talking about Angela, but she didn't know his name.
No. I said, well, if he ever comes back, get a license plate off his car, figure out some kind of way to get his name.
Yeah, this is 92. I mean, you can't just run credit cards. And a lot of places, and I think we'll get into one place, that there's not a lot of places that are doing video at this point.
Right.
Like surveillance for their business.
Well, that same day, Angela's father calls me and tells me that he's discovered that a Bentley brand 5-inch portable television, black and white television, is missing from her apartment. It was a birthday gift that he had given to her. And so it appeared that whoever killed her stole this Bentley brand portable television.
Gotcha.
On Friday, September the 11th, I contact the Dallas Area Rapid Transit, and I talk to their security team and find someone who will talk to me, trying to verify what time Kenneth Smith worked on the 27th of August, because he had told other detective, whose name I'm not going to use,
Okay.
that he worked from 4 p.m. to 11 p.m. They told me that on August the 27th, he worked from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. And did not return to work until 4 p.m. on Friday, August 28th.
Well, a little different story there.
Yes. I talked to Kenneth Smith's wife.
I don't think, well, let's just take a step back. I don't think that detective, which I understand why you're keeping, he didn't follow this code here, did he?
No, he did not.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
He should have called
Right.
Dart himself,
Right.
but he did not.
And then a couple days later, you find out he didn't.
Yes.
And so you did what you needed to do.
Yes. It's my case.
Right.
I learned through the people at Dart that Kenneth Smith and his wife were separated, and she lived in an apartment in Irving.
Gotcha.
I went to speak to her, and I learned that they were separated, and that Smith was living alone at the Sugar Creek apartments, which were about a few miles west of where Mill Valley was.
Right.
Then on Sunday, September the 13th of 1992, I've got the phone numbers from the dry erase board, and I'm calling all these people on this dry erase board to see what they may know.
Yeah, because they're at home.
Yes. I called and spoke to a Marine Corps pilot who was stationed at Pensacola, Florida. He remembered talking to Angela on Thursday, August 20th, a week before the murder.
Okay.
But on a Thursday night, at about midnight, a week before she was murdered.
Okay.
During their conversation, the Marine Corps pilot said Angela heard a knock at the door. She looked through her peephole and told the pilot, "That guy that has been leaving notes on my car is at my door." That establishes for me that Kenneth Smith had been at her apartment a week before she was murdered, late at night. That caused me to have a little more suspicion about his involvement in this.
Well, and knowing his schedule now from 6A to 11A, and then don't come in until 4 the next day, means that you could have a late night and still show up for work the next
Exactly.
day pretty easily.
Yes.
Pretty, okay.
And I had, in the interim, gone to this ex-boyfriend's place in North Texas, interviewed him, got his alibi. He voluntarily gave his blood, hair samples, took them to the crime lab, gave DNA, and he was cleared forensically. And he had a verifiable alibi.
Right.
So that person of interest went away.
Yes, sir.
On Tuesday, September the 15th, 1992, at 2:45 in the afternoon, I had reached out to Smith by phone, asking him to come to the police station so I could ask him some questions.
Sure.
He voluntarily drove to the police station, the Grand Prairie police station, in his car, parked his car in the Grand Prairie police station parking lot, and came inside. The switchboard called me. My office was on the second floor. The detectives were all on the second floor, and tells me that there's a man named Kenneth Smith here to see you. Inside, my insides are turning.
Right.
This doesn't make any sense that a person who is a person of interest in a capital murder is voluntarily here to talk to me.
Yeah, second time.
Yes.
Right.
And he talked to the previous detective, and he's talking to me now. And it's confusing me because most times I needed to talk to somebody who was a suspect in a murder, talk to my attorney.
Right, or they bring one there with them.
I have the right to remain silent, etc. like that.
Sure.
So I walked downstairs, got in the elevator, went downstairs, and I walked to the lobby, and I met Kenneth Smith for the first time. This is at 2:45 in the afternoon. We get in the elevator, shaking my hand. Nice to meet you. Hope I can help you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about this. I mean, inside it just doesn't make any sense to me.
Right.
Well, if this guy's really a suspect, then why is he here? It's confusing me.
Did you come across like not very smart? Or?
No, he just was very polite.
What? Oh.
So we get off of the elevator, and to get to my cubicle, we had to walk by the detective secretary's area. As we're walking by, the secretary says, "Detective Patten, you have a phone call from Arlington PD crime scene. They'd like to talk to you." I didn't want him to sit in my cubicle because there were things in my cubicle I didn't want him to see.
Sure.
We had a little small room where our video recording equipment was for our interview room where we recorded interviews. There was a chair in there, and I just asked him to sit in the chair.
Right.
He said, "No problem." I said, "I'll be right back with you." I take the phone call, and it's the fingerprint specialist from Arlington PD, and he says, "We have a confirmation that fingerprint on that wine box with the smear blood is the left middle fingerprint of Kenneth Smith."
And then you get that news, and he's sitting in your video.
Yes, and that's probable cause to get a warrant for his arrest.
Right.
So I go and get Detective Oseguera, who was my partner basically,
Yeah.
and I ask him to get a warrant for Kenneth Smith's arrest for capital murder. And I say, "I'm going to establish a rapport in this interview, this little room. When the warrant is signed, if you would, knock on the door."
Yeah, I want to hear about this interview.
Yes. So I go inside this room, and I close the door behind me. It's a real small room where he's sitting down, I'm standing up.
Yeah.
And I'm establishing a rapport, is what I call it. It's my way of saying I'm killing time, but I'm also asking questions. So I asked him, "How did you know Angela?" He said, "When I lived there, I worked for Pepsi. And there were times when she would ask me if I would get a case of Pepsi using my employee discount, and I would take this Pepsi to her." As he's talking, I'm thinking, my mind is never stopping.
Right.
So he's been in her apartment. They had a glass of wine. He went and got a glass of wine so I'm just going in through all this, and I said, well, did you ever leave? She complained to the manager you were leaving notes on her car. I never left notes on her car. That's wrong. I don't know who said that, but that's wrong. I never left notes on her car. Okay? So I'm saying, so have you ever been in her apartment? Are you not listening to me? And he used some curse words. I've never crossed the threshold of her apartment, M.F.er. So you've never gone in her apartment? He stands up. He puts his toes on the edge of the tile in the room. He says, you see where my toes are on the edge of that tile? We're nose to nose. I've got a gun. I'm not worried about what he's going to do to me. Yeah. That's the getting into her apartment. That's the threshold of her apartment right there. Do you get that? Yes, I do. I've never crossed the threshold of her apartment, and he calls me another bad name. The doorknob. I said, and explain to me how your left middle fingerprint is on a bloody wine box in a refrigerator. You're under arrest for capital murder. He stopped talking to me right then. I handcuffed him, took him down to the jail, and booked him in. Where was his car? Parked in the parking lot of the Grand Prairie Police Department. We impounded it.
You're going to impound it.
Yes.
And now that he's a suspect, you're going to search.
And obtained a search warrant.
Sure.
To search the vehicle. This other detective went to the auto pound in Grand Prairie and searched the vehicle. In the back floorboard behind the driver's side seat, this is the vehicle he purposely drove to the Grand Prairie Police Department to talk to Detective Patten. About Angela Crockett's murder. Yes. There was a Hershey's Kisses candy tin. Angela had been in the military as a medic. Inside that Hershey's Kisses candy tin was her military collar brass. Serial killers take trophies of their victims. I believe that he took this trophy of her, and he would have eventually killed other people, as his memory of the sexual activity he had with her after he killed her. There was also a piece of junk mail with her phone number and name written on it, her handwriting. Her dad identified that Hershey's Kisses candy tin as a gift he gave her for Christmas in 1991. So we have him in possession of property stolen from her apartment.
Did he commit crimes prior to this in order for them to have fingerprints on file for him?
We were individually.
Oh, you took his
fingerprints.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Now he had been arrested.
He had been in there before. That's right.
He had been arrested in New York PD for possession of stolen property years before.
Okay, got it.
But no,
You'd already taken it, so yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We were taking fingerprints from all the persons of interest.
Yeah, that's right.
Compared to that print.
Gotcha.
And so, basically, he's booked in. I got a search warrant to search him for the hair and head fibers and for blood and DNA. I took him over we drove from Grand Prairie to the Southwest Institute of Forensic Science in Dallas. And he didn't say a word to me. All these tests were taken. Took him back to the police station. I didn't say anything to him. Booked him back in. He was taken to the Dallas County Jail to pen trial.
Whatever happened to the 5-inch TV?
On Thursday, September the 17th, the Dallas County Crime Lab confirms that the hairs that were recovered on the carpet and intertwined in her vaginal region and on her chest belonged to Kenneth Smith. So the forensic evidence is identifying him as her killer. They also match that single head chest hair on her chest to be his. On Monday, September the 21st, I'm at my cubicle with an electric typewriter typing my criminal case. We didn't have word processors back then. We had to type a report. I'm typing my report, and I'm mentally very in tune with this case I'm typing. And all of a sudden, check with Irving PD to see if he pawned anything there. He lived in Grand Prairie. Yeah, his wife lived in Irving, but basically, from upstairs, check with Irving PD. I checked pawn shops in Dallas and Grand Prairie, and he hadn't pawned anything. Right. So I called the Irving Police Department on Monday, September 21st, 1992, and I tracked down their detective who handles the pawn shops. And I told him, looking to see if Kenneth Smith has pawned anything in Irving. In about 10 minutes, he calls me back. Well, the only thing I can see is on August the 28th, the day her body was discovered, he pawned a Bentley brand portable television and a 35 millimeter camera at a pawn shop in North Irving.
Wow.
So, having worked pawn shops as a property crime detective, I knew that just because he pawned it didn't mean he pawned it. Sure. You can give your driver's license to somebody. So we would put together a photo lineup, a 6-picture lineup, to see if we could get the person who took the pawn to identify the person who pawned the item. Didn't know anything about a camera then, just about the TV.
Yes, sir.
I prepare the lineup. I go over to the pawn shop. I walk into the pawn shop. I meet the clerk who processed the pawn. He says, okay, you want to show me a lineup? Yes, I do. I don't need to see a lineup. What? We videotape all of our pawns. He brings me a VHS tape recording that shows Kenneth Smith pawning this Bentley brand portable television and the camera at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
On the 28th of August. The camera had a roll of film in it. And I took the film out and took it to Eckerd's to have the film developed. It was pictures from her sister's July wedding. So the family didn't know that she had a camera that had been stolen.
Right.
So now I have forensic evidence and I have stolen property that he pawned. The evidence is growing in terms of evidence against him as the perpetrator in this crime.
We still have that. I mean, I'm in a pawn business.
Yes.
So if something does happen, there's a program called Leads Online that someone can report missing items. The key thing is just keeping up with serial numbers and model numbers and things like that. Helps us tremendously. We get a bad rap from time to time of taking in stolen items and things like that, but really it's very, very minuscule. I just wanted to add that.
So I recovered a couple of murder weapons from pawn shops.
Wow.
In my early days of major crime detective. Well, then on Tuesday, the 22nd of September, I filed my case with the Dallas County District Attorney for capital murder. And the DNA results had not yet come back. All the other evidence had. On Friday, October the 15th of 1992, I get a call from the Dallas County District Attorney's office that Kenneth Smith and his attorney wants to meet with us, them and me, they have some information they want to share with us.
Okay.
I go to this meeting. It's me, 2 attorneys from the Dallas County DA's office, and his attorney, court appointed. And basically, the attorney tells us, Kenneth, tell them what you told me. Kenneth says that in his time that he got to know Angela, that she told him there was this Hispanic male that was about 21 or so years old that had been following her and basically stalking her and had threatened to kill her. And he says, okay, I went to her apartment that Thursday night. And when I knocked on the door opened. When the door opened, I saw her dead body on the floor. And as sad as this may sound, I was aroused sexually by the sight of her dead body. And I did go have sexual relations with her dead body. But I didn't kill her. A sick theory, but it's something that I have to address now, because what he's done is he's come up with a strategy to put doubt in the mind of a juror beyond a reasonable doubt that, okay, you're sick and you had sex with a dead body, but the description that you gave us is the description that lady gave you of the guy that was walking up the
His
stairs.
lawyers coached him up to saying, hey, this is doubtful, and that, we can make this story up. Or it's really what happened.
Yep. And so a month and 3 days later,
Wow.
on Thursday, November 18th, 1992, I get a call from the lady at Heflin's Airport in Arlington, Texas. And she tells me that the man that she heard talking about Angela on September the 3rd had returned to the hairstylist shop. And she gave me his name, driver's license number, and his car license plate.
Awesome.
That led me to a man named Anthony Papacristo. In my search of Anthony Papacristo, I found that he lived in an apartment complex in Fort Worth, just west of the Arlington city limits. I tried to do a lot of my work via telephone. I would call and say, this is Detective Patten. Here's the main number for the Grand Prairie Police. Call and have them transfer you. You're talking to a cop. So I call and I ask to speak to the manager. And they want to know why. I said, well, I just need to talk to the manager. So the manager calls me back. And I explained to her, I'm trying to find Anthony Papacristo. Does he live at your apartment complex? She says, I'm not going to talk to you about this on the phone. I need you to come see me in person. And that had happened before where, okay, I'm trying to save some time, but, just trying to confirm his driver's license address is in an apartment in that location.
Right.
So on November the 18th, I drove to this apartment complex by myself. I went into the office, and I went into the manager's office, and she closed the door behind me. And she said, why are you looking for Anthony Papacristo? I said, ma'am, I really can't explain that to you. I said, I just need to find out if he lives here. I need to find out if he's here now. She goes, he's my brother.
Oh, my goodness.
So I'm talking to his sister.
Wow.
And he comes in the office from the office next to hers. And then he tells me that he had met her through a dating service. And they had been talking for about a month about having dinner together. And he said on August the 27th, they were talking on the phone. And she said, you've been very, very kind and patient with me. Stop and pick us up some chicken from Church's Chicken. And let's have dinner for the very first time. Let's have a dinner date at my house, in my apartment. So it was he, Anthony to carry the church's chicken up to the door, seen by the woman who was being kind of nosy. And he went with me to the Southwest Institute of Forensic Science in Dallas and gave voluntarily blood, hair, and we eliminated him as a donor of any of those things.
Wow.
So we physically, through the evidence, were able to prove he had nothing to do with that murder. But that was a big puzzle piece.
Oh, huge.
That discovery nullified his defense strategy. So then on...
And it basically says that, so Papa Cheeto, if he would have stayed, that he could have been similar to the person that she was calling, the military person that she was on the phone with. He would have been there as maybe a protector of sorts, like the previous Thursday night.
Yes.
In some way, she was on the phone. Maybe Mr. Smith saw her on the phone. He left.
Yeah. Well, of course, on December the 12th is when the Southwest Institute of Forensic Sciences DNA section confirmed they had a positive match to the semen found inside during the sexual assault examination as being the semen of Kenneth Smith. So then on Monday, February the 8th, 1993, during a hearing on the defense motions to suppress the evidence that had been gathered, suddenly Kenneth Smith changes his plea from not guilty to guilty. Found guilty because he pled guilty to capital murder. In Texas, you cannot plead guilty to capital murder and receive the death sentence. You get life, but you can't be given the death penalty if you change your plea. And the judge asked him if he had anything to say, and he said, "I want to tell the Crocket family I am sorry for what I did. I wish I could change it." And he was sentenced to capital life, which was
Wow.
40 years.
That is I mean, it's a sad story, very sad, and like you said, it's a very gruesome story. There's some details that are hard to digest, honestly. You sent over some of the details, and as a human being, a rational mind, you just can't fathom. You did bring a couple of things, which I know for the folks that are just listening, they're not going to be able to see it, so you have to wait for YouTube. If you want to bring a couple of those things out, when you make your presentations locally, you bring these pieces of evidence with you.
Yes. I was asked to make a presentation to the a homicide organization in South Texas.
Gotcha.
And I checked with the property room. This is after I retired. I checked with the property room because I knew about these two pieces of evidence, and he had pled guilty. And I kind of wanted to take them to show. And so basically, the property supervisor who I hired, as the detective sergeant, said there's no need. These are still here. He pled guilty. There's not going to be an appeal. So what I have here with me.
Here, put it up on the table if you want.
Okay.
Make it a little easier for you. Here, I'll grab one myself. You just tell me. I don't want to smear anything.
But like here is the dry erase board
Okay.
with all the numbers and the names on it of the people that we called.
We've got Dad, Larry, Chip, Bernie, I think.
Chip, Jerry, Tim, all kinds of, so all these guys were
Right,
talking
Tim,
to.
Jerry.
Yes. And then here is the beer bottle
Okay.
that was on the sink in the bathroom. It was cleaned up, his fingerprints.
Right.
Then there was this book that was laying on the floor by her hand. And on the back of this book is a quote from the book, that's the way books are sometimes written.
Right. It's an outtake.
This says, "I have your keys and I'm coming up. In a few minutes, you'll be dead." This is laying next to her hand.
Wow.
Initially, we thought that eerily, whoever killed her had purposely put that down there because whoever killed her, which was Kenneth Smith, took her key and locked her door.
Right.
This is
And
that
they knew
book.
that if they were trying to take some type of
Trophy.
that
Yes.
that would be a photograph that they knew that you guys would take, and you can actually see bloodstains
Yes,
in the
on the
spine,
book.
the spine of the book.
Yes, and the thought that we had that this had been planted there after the fact was thrown away because the blood smear on the floor and on the book matched.
Right.
So it was just eerily
It was
there.
Right.
And then there is a Franzia brand wine box. And look, a
Wow.
fingerprint on the top of the wine box. And
So basically, that box was on the way to the beer.
yes, it had to be moved to get to the beer.
Gotcha.
This is where Kenneth Smith's fingerprint was lifted off of this wine box.
Gotcha.
And then there was the,
Is there a picture of a car, I think, in there too?
oh, well, there is, isn't there? That's right. And here is the crime scene tape around Kenneth Smith's car that we secured it while we obtained a search warrant so nobody could go into the vehicle. This is at the Grand Prairie Police Auto Pound.
Wow.
But we still took the steps to make sure it was secured.
Wow.
And then there was the chicken box.
I'll let you take care of that.
And we collected this because it had some prints on it as well. This
Wow,
is,
look at all the. Yeah, there
yes.
is quite a few.
this is the box of chicken that Anthony Papacristo took and had dinner with
I'll
her,
take a picture.
and that they left in the
Wow.
refrigerator. So we weren't sure why it was there, but it had plenty of prints on it.
Right.
So these things I was able to obtain from the Grand Prairie Police Property Room to use in my case study presentations in the years since then.
Wow. That's awesome. Thanks so much for bringing that. These visual representations. Man, that's a lot to take in. A lot to take in. And
Can I add something here real
yeah,
quick?
yeah. Add whatever you like.
Because, and I may have already touched on this somewhat, because of the Hershey's Kisses candy tin with the military color brass, this other detective and I both were in agreement, as well as other detectives in the Major Crimes Unit, that this was a serial killer wannabe in Kenneth Smith. And we believe that had he not been caught for Angela's murder, that he would have killed again. There was theories about, from my perspective, his wife and he were separated. His mother had treated him bad as a kid, and I just believe that he was angry at the woman gender, and all of a sudden it came out of him in this violent way. And I believe that because he had been leaving notes on her car and she hadn't been responding and didn't answer the door that night he was there a week before she was murdered, that he had had enough of her and wanted to show her who the boss was. And when he knocked on the door, I believe she opened the door because she was tired of him coming to her apartment. And as soon as she opened the door, he cut her throat and began the attack. There's blood all over the carpet. There was a struggle. And the answering machine where her sister had called had been pulled off from the bar into a bar stool. And so there was just, all of this made total sense. But I feel certain that he would have killed again had he not been caught and convicted of her murder.
I agree. The other thing that I think is pretty apparent is you guys' tenacity. You guys had it pretty covered up pretty quickly. Like, you had persons of interest very quickly. You were canvassing. You were, talking to, family. You were getting your names together. You were making your calls. You were making, and this is back. Communication was quite a bit more difficult, and you had them in mid-September. You were already talking to them, and the murder occurred at the end of August. So I mean, that turnaround time doesn't typically exist in a bigger city that quickly, right?
Right. Well, let me throw in this thing that's very important in my life. The school resource officer at Grand Prairie High School was a dear, dear friend of mine. This murder occurred in Mill Valley Apartments, directly across the street from the high school.
Yep.
And after the arrest had been made, the case had been filed, this officer came by my cubicle one day, and he said, "Alan, how did you solve this case?" And out of my mouth, these words came. Patience is a virtue, persistence is a choice. The next day when I came to work, there were signs all over everything at the Grand Prairie Police Station.
Right.
I had my locker, my cubicle,
Yeah.
and I have that in my office at home now. Somebody created a document. But this patience and this tenacity was fueled by the oath that I took as a practical homicide investigator, not to let anything
Right.
keep me from finding the truth on behalf of the surviving members of the family.
Sure.
And so that time, that case, there were plenty of other homicides that I was involved in where my tenacity was challenged here, there, and yonder.
Sure.
But I got to the truth. I always said I wanted to get as close to the truth as I can with the benefit of being a place when a thing happened.
Right.
Because I was just as innocent as I worked just as hard to prove innocence as I did guilt.
Sure.
Because then I got as close to the truth as I could.
Yes, sir.
And there were times where I would clear people who were falsely accused of a crime because the evidence proved somebody else did it.
Yes, sir.
And so it's just it's something I taught the detectives that worked for me when I became a sergeant. And in the years that I've done investigations since 1984, I've learned that tenacity is important because getting to the truth. There's so many people that they get half the truth or a happy camper as a detective.
Yeah.
No?
They jump to conclusions.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I just want to throw that in there too.
Yeah. Sure.
That was a spontaneous response to his question.
Right.
Patience is a virtue. Persistence is a choice.
Right. So before we wrap up, typically speaking, I'm gonna change it up a little bit because this has been awesome. Listening to the story, you kind of sent it over, but you added so much more detail, and the way you tell it it's just very, very intriguing. It's sad, but it's intriguing, and it's very interesting to hear how you work through the clues and the details, and having people in and talking to them and all that good stuff. But typically on our podcast, at the end of the podcast, we let the guests have some shout outs or recognition and all that good stuff. You already recognized a couple of people. And I want to recognize someone in your life that I know is very important to you. And she let you come tonight. And that's your wife, Miss Patten. Thank you so much for letting me borrow him for a couple hours on this Thursday night. By the way, it's my birthday.
Oh, well, happy birthday.
Thank you. It was that important. You told me the 9th was open. And, I was like, hey, let's do this, and you're an important person to me. We're happily going, hopefully this went well.
Oh, yes, sir.
You enjoyed it?
Oh, yeah. We got more to do.
Oh, that's what I'm hoping
more
for.
cases.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
So, that's what I want to do is we want to put Detective Sergeant Patten on a rotation where we can feature one of your homicides that you solved and kind of break it into pieces like you did today, talk about some of the people of interest, Some of them, like you said, aren't going to be as gruesome in some of the, what the scene looked like, but they're all have interweavings, especially the ones that may have been a little more difficult or maybe or it took a little bit longer to solve. But nonetheless, I'm looking forward to getting into those because, as you know, I mean, and I'm sure our listeners and our viewers know is that for any of these, I have to do a pretty good amount of research to at least sound somewhat engaging, smart, kind of smart, not really, but kind of, and at least be able to have that one-on-one with you. And obviously, I studied probably harder into this, so that way I can keep pace with the details. And it was such an interesting conversation. I'm looking very, very forward to having you on as long as Ms. Patten is okay with it. I just got to borrow you for a little bit, right?
Well, can I tease your listeners?
Yes, please.
Okay.
So, by the way, we have you coming back on in August.
Okay.
We severed out a date Ms. Patten agreed to.
Mm-hmm.
So let's, so what is the next homicide that we're going to be solving?
Well, a murder of a crack cocaine dealer
Okay.
that I call one thing leads to another.
Okay.
The murder of a crack cocaine dealer who was killed 2 months before I became a major crimes detective.
Okay.
I solved his murder 2.5 years later.
Wow.
And it involves the suicide of a girl I went to high school with.
Oh, do we want to go into more details?
And you're not going to believe where I found the murder weapon.
That's enough. All right. I really enjoyed it tonight. And I hope you did too.
Yes, sir.
I thought it was great. I thought it was really great. Thanks so much for tuning in. Our next guest is going to be, I don't know, a little more cheerful and a little different information. It's going to be the mortgage house in Tyler. Looking forward to talking to Marquis and Terry about mortgages. Obviously, that's a hot topic right now, buying houses, selling houses, and all that good stuff. But obviously, they deal more with the mortgage component of it. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you soon.